Hello and welcome to my channel. Welcome again to my series on the God universe. In this video, I am going to explain how pure consciousness senses and what consciousness intelligence is. So, let's start off with the senses part. Let me define what I mean by pure consciousness, right? So far I've been using the term thinking consciousness and higher selves. They're all energy, and they're all the thinking aspects of the God soup. The thing is, human beings, we're also thinking consciousness. So I don't want to say that we are not thinking consciousness. So rather, I wanted to differentiate the consciousness that's integrated within the human body and the consciousness that's not integrated within the human body. I decided to use the term pure consciousness. So pure consciousness in this video, in this series, is consciousness that is not integrated in a physical human body, and human beings. I would tend to use the term human for us humans. We are also consciousness, you see. So but I'm trying to differentiate. I'm trying to make a difference to us consciousness in the human form, in human body, integrated into human body, and consciousness that isn't integrated into human body, because there are massive variation in abilities, and it's to try and explain that. Anyway, that took a long time to just explain pure consciousness. So we'll start with senses, right? So human senses, as humans, we sense. We've got eyes to see, nose to smell, mouth to taste, ears to hear, skin to feel pressure and temperature. So we'll talk about our 5 senses, and we actually do have 6 senses, and the 6th sense is emotions. We don't really see our ability to feel emotions as a sense, but actually it is. It is an internal emotion, and I say feel when we don't just feel emotion. You see, it's sort of. I think the best way to describe it, you can call it an emotion management system, because you feel your emotions and you manage your emotions, and then you can sense what someone else feels, what someone else or what they might be feeling, and you say things or do things to maybe avoid conflict or trigger conflict deliberately. That is kind of an intelligent part of the human senses, the emotional sense. You see, but we just don't recognize it as a sense, but it is. I've explained us how we sense as human beings, but all of that, if you notice, is with the physical body, right? So our consciousness senses via the physical body. Now, the emotional sense is located in the tailbone. Talk about that later. Not in this video, further on in the series. But pure consciousness now, so consciousness that is not integrated into the human form. So I'm talking about the inner being when it's not integrated in the human, the part of the inner being that's not integrated in the human body. I'm talking about your higher selves. I'm talking about your super consciousnesses, sound man, magneto, those guys, like the higher selves and those big consciousnesses. They sense as, something I forgot, haven't I? They sense as a singularity. So those guys, they sense as a singularity. And what I mean by that is consciousness, pure consciousness, I say they're not sort of completely separate from us, but pure consciousness senses colors, sound, temperature, pressure, all of those. They sense it with a common part of themselves. It's not separated, and that's really weird, because I had this conversation with my inner being to try and explain this concept to me, because all I know is you see colors, textures with your eyes, you smell with your nose. It's really weird to think that you can see with the same thing that you smell with the same thing that you hear with. But that's how pure consciousness is. So, and one of the ways that this kind of helped me to understand this was when we talked about a singularity. I did use cheese in my head, but I can't find any cheese, so I'm going to use this today. If this toy, this is a castle, it's a plastic castle toy, one of my kids' toys. If this toy is this castle is part of a pure consciousness, this is the senses part of pure consciousness. Pure consciousness, this one thing, this senses part of consciousness, hears, sees, feels pressure and temperature with this one thing, with the same thing. And that's because, I think that's because this one thing has, like, it's a combination of, I say it's a combination of, this one thing carries within it something that detects vibration and frequency and electrical signals. It's all mixed up into this one thing. So here we are. We know, so consciousness knows that, and this same thing senses emotion as well. And in emotion, they sense emotion in the energy of emotions. So each consciousness can sense each other. They can sense the other consciousnesses, and they can also how the other consciousnesses are feeling or whatever they're doing, see what they are doing or what they have done with the same thing. And they can also sense they can also sense emotions within the energy of emotions and within the other consciousnesses with this same thing. So one of the design for the human being was to deconstruct the parts of senses. I haven't looked at the time. Let's have a quick look. I got 10 minutes. So one of the things was to deconstruct these into so when the human form was designed, it was to deconstruct the senses, because the senses affect the energy of emotions. That seems a bit weird when I say it, but if you think about it, your emotions are affected by what you see, what you hear, like what others do, that's what you see. Music you listen to, that's what you hear. What you smell, even sometimes, do you know what I mean? So your senses actually are affected. Your senses affect your emotions. And so consciousness decided to deconstruct the senses by designing the human body to take in the different signals. So here I've got smell with the nose. I've got here ears for hearing. This is when the human form, the human body bits were designed. We've got here eyes for seeing. Have I got enough space on this thing? I don't know. Oh, wrong one. We got here, you can taste with your mouth. You've got emotion, and look, you've got skin, right? So the human body has all of this. The human body has all of this areas, all of this, not areas, organs. So the organs were designed to only, use certain signals. So for example, like the eyes was designed to only pick up colors and light and textures, right? The ears designed to only pick up sound vibration. The skin designed to pick up temperature variation, pressure variation. Does that make sense? Which means that although we have different parts of the body that's picking up different signals, different external stimuli, signals, they're actually all going to a single place in our consciousness to be for interpretation. Does that make sense? So the body, and therefore the brain, was designed to use the eyes. So you can't hear with your eyes because that's how it was. It was only designed to take in light and colors and everything else. So, and then you have the skin. You feel pressure from the surface of your skin and temperature variation and impact. Well, that's pressure on when someone punches you, because that is pressure from the surface of the skin. But all of that, all of those signals, different signals, were split out from what consciousness, how consciousness actually senses, right? And it means that everything goes back to be interpreted and evaluated in the same place. So the impact, stop. Oh, I got time. I was worried about time. So the impact of what you feel, is it the impact or is it information? So the information from your eyes and your nose and your ears and your skin, all of that goes via the brain to the same place for evaluation and interpretation in your mind. And you know, you gotta wonder, I do have to wonder, the one thing that it just automatically made me feel like with a singularity of senses is that every single person has the ability to evaluate within them all of that: taste, sight here, and therefore what I'm thinking about, which I didn't actually script this, but I'm just thinking about it, is people that are blind and people that cannot hear, people that are deaf. They ultimately actually have that ability within their consciousness anyway. The question is why, especially those that are born deaf and born blind. I said earlier that consciousness deconstructed its senses using the human body so that it learns about itself, how it learns about how these senses impact its own emotion and the emotions of others close to it. That's not the only reason. The way to find out really is to connect with your inner being, because your inner being can tell you. But then you have to think. Your inner being is pure consciousness, right? Your inner being is pure consciousness. I'm going off tangent here, I know. Your inner being is pure consciousness. Your inner being can sense all of this. So really, how deaf are you and how blind are you when you are connected, when you are currently connected to pure consciousness? This is just something I'm curious about. It's just personal curiosity for me. I don't know people that have, I don't know anyone, there's no one close to me that is profoundly deaf or blind. So I don't know, but I do know that everybody has an inner being, and that inner being has all these senses. So how does that work? I don't know. How does that? I would just love to talk to them. It's just something I'm curious about. Pure consciousness has everything, yet the physical self is deficient of some of these things. Why? Like, why? And the only person that can tell us or inform us of that is that person's inner being and higher self. You know, like, wow. And that's why I'm curious. Anyway, now I'm going to talk about consciousness intelligence. Okay, let's talk about consciousness intelligence, right? Pure consciousness intelligence, that is. Talk about human intelligence. When you think of intelligence, we think of someone's ability to learn something, interpret it, apply that knowledge, and also the ability to reason. That's how we think of intelligence. Pure consciousness intelligence is all of that and more. So there are 4 elements to pure consciousness intelligence. The first one is the ability to learn and interpret data, information, and their ability to reason. Pure consciousness is able to look at information and absorb it quickly, right? It's kind of like it's kind of like, hang on. It's kind of like you've just learned how to do your numbers, you know, how to do your additions for numbers, 1 + 1. And now you can now also understand like the Bernoulli equations. I mean, the Bernoulli equations is something I did at university. Imagine being able to learn your additions at infant school. Just, you know, you normally do additions at infant school, 1 + 1, 2. And now you can understand a Bernoulli equation, thermodynamic equation of some sort. That is how consciousness is. They can learn and interpret very quickly, sometimes almost instantaneously. That's the first element. The second one is attending to multiple activities simultaneously. This is not the same as multitasking. Yes, I know you can watch TV while you're chopping the vegetables. No. What I mean by multiple activities simultaneously is, it's almost like, you know how you always say to yourself, I have only got 2 pairs of hands. I can only do one thing at a time. It's that. Consciousness can do more than one thing at a time. An example, homeschooling time. Homeschooling, and let me just check the time quickly. 2 minutes, okay. An example, homeschooling. During the lockdown with the homeschooling, I did the homeschooling for for both my daughters, right? Obviously, they're quite young. One of them with a disability, and the other one, she's like at infant school. So it wasn't a situation where I could just leave her to get on with it. They both actually needed one-to-one attention. And I couldn't, so I'm saying I couldn't be with both of them at the same time, giving them one-to-one attention. It's that kind of task I'm talking about. I couldn't be with both of my daughters at the same time, giving them one-to-one, teaching them in a one-to-one attention type situation or scenario. I could teach, because they had different needs. I'll teach one of them or give them something to do, and while they're doing it, I'll go to the other one and I'll try and pay, and give her something to do, or stay with her for a bit. Sometimes I tell the first one, why, okay, especially the younger one who didn't have any disabilities, I work with her earlier on, so I spend a bit more time with her, and then eventually give her something that she can spend a little bit of time doing on her own, and then I go to the second one. I go to my first kid. There is absolutely nobody, no human being that can attend to more than one task at a time. Very different to very different to multitasking. It's very different. You can think of something and do something else. That's kind of multitasking. You can even plan several things and say that's no. But it's almost like you cannot be in several places at once. Yet pure consciousness can be in several places at once, attending to everything, attending to things that needs attending to. Okay, that's what I mean by they can attend to multiple things simultaneously at the same time, right? Now, the other element is creativity. Pure consciousness can create. So I'll use a musical example. So a musician will learn you first learn notes, the basics, the foundation of music. So by learning musical notes and how it's put together and then how to play, but then you create your own original music. That kind of creativity, that's a pure consciousness ability. Same with an artist, a painting artist. They learn how to use, they learn about colors and strokes and techniques. And then after they've done all that learning, they can apply those techniques that they have learned to something and create something that's original and that's new to them. That is a consciousness intelligence, to be able to create things, to be able to create original things. And the fourth and final one is actually consciousness communication. Consciousness, pure consciousness, communicate via thoughts. thoughts, they communicate via thoughts. Yes, they do communicate via thoughts, but you saw on my list that on the list of what consciousness is like heat energy, light energy, magnetic energy, electrical energy, all of that, all those gestalt of energies, and there was thought energy there. But thought energy is actually a combination of light energy and sound energy. So thought energy is derived from light energy and sound energy, and which sounds a bit strange. And we all have thought energy, as in the human consciousness, we have thought energy. And I'll show you, and I'll give you, and I'll ask you. I can't even show this to you, but anyway, I'll give you an example. Think of a house, right? Any house, inside the house, outside the house, doesn't matter. You have an image in your mind, right? But that image is made up of light and color and texture, right? Can you see? And then if I say, think of a family member, I don't know, your husband, wife, brother, sister, and think of a conversation that you had with them. And in your mind, you are actually thinking of that person in their voice. You're actually remembering that conversation in their voice. Their voice could be male. You can remember it's like you're remembering it, but actually you're not remembering it. You're forming. Well, you are remembering it, but that memory is a formation of sound energy within consciousness, within your consciousness, in your mind. Can you see? So thought is a combination of light. You think you have images, that's light, and you have sound, but you're not hearing the sound externally. That is your consciousness bit using sound energy, right? We never think about this because that's us. It's something that you think, and therefore you can, when you think of things, people and sounds, and you don't realize that you're forming those with the thought energy within your consciousness, but that's what you're doing in your mind, right? So I said consciousness communicate via thoughts, right? So I've described what thoughts are. Now, the higher selves, as in not us integrated in the human form, but the higher selves and all the other super consciousnesses. If you remember, I said that I remember this, my centipede, and I said that every time a higher self is formed or a new consciousness is formed, they actually are still attached to the base unit, consciousness A. So if a higher self wants to communicate with another higher self, because say they want something, so all they have to do is think of that higher self, or think of what that higher self might be. So they'll be thinking, so usually a higher self is looking for something. So they're doing work in their own space, and they need help or assistance or something. So they would probably they will request for a consciousness and a higher self that has certain abilities, and so they might have deduced that actually I want a higher self that has a low intensity light blue, right? And they think about it, or at least they make that request, and consciousness A connects them to that higher self. Right? So they've identified that whatever they're doing, or whatever assistance they need, a particular higher self holds that answer. And all they have to do is think within themselves that higher self is think within themselves the signature of that higher self, and the base unit, consciousness A, will connect them to, will link them to that higher self. Now, well, what if the higher self doesn't exist? What if you've said this is the you know what, let me just stop there, because I'm describing something and I'm thinking of something else. And what I'm thinking about is I haven't mentioned that the higher selves, they all have, yes, they have thought. They use thought energy to communicate with themselves, and I said thought energy is a combination of light and sound. But if you remember, their light energy comes in various guises. So they all have a variety of light energy, which means that their light energy has its own unique signature. If their light energy has a unique signature for them, then that means that their thought energy, which is it's not a derivative, it's a combination of light and sound energy. Their thought energy also has a unique signature. Therefore, when a higher self is thinking about the signature of a higher self, whether it exists or not, that higher self will, consciousness A, base unit, will link them up to that higher self. Like I said, whether it exists or not. What am I talking about if it doesn't exist? If that, one higher self needs an assistant and believes that, or thinks that yes, the assistant can be made or fulfilled by a higher self with this particular signature. If that particular signature is a consciousness that exists, consciousness A will link them. If that signature is one of a consciousness that doesn't exist, one will be formed and brought to them. So if you basically, a higher self will make a request of who they want to speak to, and they will be brought to them, whether they existed prior or not. You will always get someone coming to you. So let me just stop for a minute and catch my breath. Right. So these are the four key elements of consciousness intelligence: the ability to learn and interpret information and reason, the ability to the ability to learn, interpret information and reason, the ability to create things, the ability to communicate, and also the ability to attend to multiple situations simultaneously. These are the four. Two of those are singular, a bit like the consciousness senses, as in they are singular to consciousness in that it is the part of them that. And those two, by the way, those two are the ability to learn, the ability to learn the ability to learn new things, and your ability to reason, that, to be able to do that very quickly, that is inherent to consciousness, right? And also, which was the other one? attending to multiple situations simultaneously, that is also inherent to consciousness, right? The other one is, the other two, which is communication and creating, they're not part of the singular inherentness of consciousness. They're more abilities rather than what they are. But it's the way that they've been. It's more an advanced system. For example, communication, being able to communicate via thoughts, using thought energy, which they've created. It's an advanced system of communication. And creating stuff, the ability to create stuff from what you've learned and to create original things, an advanced system. So that's more an ability, but because of the advancedness of that ability, it's been included as part of consciousness intelligence, right? Does that make sense? So why is this important? And and as with anything, there's always a reason for it. What does this have to do with the energy of emotions? What has this got to do with the energy of emotions? Because I'm sure you're thinking, I bet you this is related to the energy of emotion. The answer is yes, it is related to the energy of emotions. How, why, where, what for? I want to stop for a minute and catch my breath. Okay, I just remembered. I just remembered when I was talking about senses earlier. I sort of did not talk about I didn't talk about why the senses were deconstructed. I said that you felt different. You had different you had different emotions based on what you saw, what you heard, what you felt. But the thing is, the higher selves also have a variety of emotions based on what they sense. Obviously, we're an extension of our higher selves. And so a higher self is evaluating an emotion. Due to the complexity of emotions, a higher self will typically only evaluate one emotion, and that emotion will include interactions with others. So, for example, if a higher self is evaluating, say, the emotion of joy, the emotion of joy is on a spectrum, right? There is really joyful experiences, or just mildly joyful experiences, or just being happy. That is a spectrum. A higher self will not just be evaluating everything that triggers joyful experiences. A higher self will also look at what will, for themselves, the higher self will also evaluate what will not even bring up the emotion of joy at all for them. Can you see how complex this is? So the evaluation of joy for a higher self will be them learning what would cause them different degrees of joy, and also what will not have joy at all in it. And this is just so they are trying to, this basically means that you're trying to distill the emotions of joy, and to get that pure joy, that emotion of joy, to learn about that emotion of joy for yourself, you have to remove every other emotion. And to remove every other emotion, you have to know what would cause all the other emotion, and therefore what you're left with will be what you're trying to learn about. And if you knew that, you now have a lot of information about yourself for evolution. Because that's what you're trying to, that's the goal. Now, I mentioned now that one of the evaluation is interaction, right? Evaluating a joyful experience will also include interaction. So, and what I'm saying here is that interaction is evaluated best. Interaction is evaluated best. Emotions are evaluated best by interaction. See what I mean? It's when you interact with people, that's when they piss you off the most. It's when you have nice cuddles with your kids, that's when you feel incredible joy. Can you see? Interaction like brings and delivers one of the most knowledge to higher selves, and hence why one of the reasons why the earth was created, so that not just so we can learn from each other, but so that we can interact, because the interaction just generates a lot of knowledge for our consciousnesses, our higher selves. Okay? Now, the interaction is actually evaluated best via or with consciousness intelligence. So I mentioned 4 elements earlier on. I might just check to I might just check just to remind myself what they are. They are learning and applying and interpreting knowledge, and with your ability to reason. They are simultaneous attention, not attention to multiple things. They are being creativity and creating new things, and they are communication. Now, consciousness wants to explore interaction more because they know interaction triggers more emotional responses, and they deconstructed consciousness intelligence to explore the emotions derived from our interactions, because in our interactions we have several kinds of feelings and behaviors, actions and interactions. Oh God, I'm just using all the actions and interactions. No, I'm saying there are actions and behaviors that are generated from our interactions with each other. That's led by our emotions. You get that? Right. So how did consciousness use the body? How did consciousness use the body to deconstruct consciousness intelligence? Right? Right. The obvious one is the mouth. I cannot think to somebody else telepathically. I have to speak to them, or write to them, or use my body language. This is method of communication, and there are probably others that I can't think of. But my point is, I am not using thought to communicate to my peers. We're using the physical body in some form, right? Yeah, even the dancing is some sort of a communication. But you understand what I'm saying, right? So consciousness has placed that sort of, is exploring interaction by communication. What you say and how you say it can be misconstrued by others, misunderstood by others. You know, the tone of your voice, even interaction. That has an impact on how someone else receives it, and therefore has an impact on their behavior, their feelings and behavior. You see, communication, one. The other one, which is attending to multiple things, is actually we can only attend to one thing, and that is because that is by design. Or rather, that's because of the design. That is by design or by necessity. What I mean by that is multiple attention is is an inherent part of consciousness itself, right? But our physical brain can only function can only function at a certain temperature range. So when consciousness integrates into the physical brain at this temperature range, which, as you know, is, what is it, 36.8 degrees or something like that. You know, when you have a fever, doctors are like, oh my God, they've got 50 degrees. They're gonna go in. Yeah, the brain stops functioning. So the brain can only function at a limited temperature range, right? The problem with that is consciousness at that temperature range of what the brain is limited to a single attention, a single task. This is why I say you can't do more than one thing, no matter how you think you can. No, you can only do one thing. You've only got a pair of hands to do one thing, because this is how the human brain is designed. At higher temperatures, consciousness can have multiple attention. You can do more than one thing at a time, but you still only got two hands, number one. But your brain, the physical brain itself, kind of goes into paralysis. So can you see? So whilst consciousness at elevated pressures have multiple attention, the physical brain doesn't actually work. It goes into paralysis. So you never actually see multiple attention. So consciousness comes down in terms of temperature, fits into this brain that's limited to this temperature range. And now consciousness is limited to just one task, just a single task. I can only do one thing at a time. I'll talk to you later. I can only think of one thing at a time, right? So that's one. So that's the second thing. The other one is the speed at which we learn and our ability to reason. Consciousness actually placed, this is part of consciousness light, and this is within the body's DNA. It's part of consciousness light, and therefore part of how consciousness integrates with the body through the pineal gland. I discussed this further along in the series from chapter 10 onwards, I believe, consciousness integration with the brain, and how it therefore infuses. Is it infuses? Is that the word I'm looking for? And how it therefore, how it infuses into your DNA. So your ability to learn and reason and apply all that knowledge, all of that stuff is within your consciousness light, and therefore within your DNA, right? And lastly is our ability to create. Again, hang on, this is in the imagination. This is the ability to create new things, is the imagination. Why? Because it's in the imagination. The imagination is in your mind, and in your mind you have thought energy, right? And thought energy is where consciousness creativity happens. Just hang on now, stop for a minute. I just want to check that I haven't forgotten anything. Okay, I think I've covered everything. So the last thing there was the ability to create, and the ability to create is in the imagination, which is in the mind, but that is also part of consciousness integration with the physical body, the mesh design, if you like. Explain more about this further down in the series. But that is all for this video today. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you found that really informative. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.